I love science. Well, what I mean is I love understanding how things work. But have you spent much time thinking about how we accumulate knowledge, and specifically the scientific method? Like, what's it at its core? What's it really for? Bonjour and welcome back. Let me share some of my thoughts on a topic I think is pretty interesting, and maybe you can give me a few insights of your own. Now, it was only some time after my physics studies that I finally got this. Maybe I'm just slow, but I'm still going to share that with you here. For reasons of pure survival, I think we're all, like 100% of us, we're all born scientists. Sure, it gets beaten out of many, mainly by the school system, but we start out with the basics nicely built in. Curiosity is the main driver, and that juice is hardwired into a whole bunch of systems. Lowenstein's information gap theory is interesting. Maybe look into that if you're curious about curiosity. But the short version being that the reason kids will ask an infinite series of why, and people will actually pay to hear answers they're curious about, is that noticing a gap in knowledge causes a mental itch, and filling that gap gives you a nice dopamine hit, getting you hooked on finding answers. I, for one, am definitely hooked. Now, if the gap is too small, you don't give a crap, and if it's an insurmountable chasm, it might all seem scary or like gibberish. So there's a sweet spot, or a sweet range, that is just enough to get you moving. There's some mapping, or at least some similarity, between this and the sweet spot for flow state, another thing I'm addicted to, where the difficulty of a problem or performance that is just at the limit of your range will let you get into the zone, where you're locked in, the flow of time is suspended, you're fully absorbed. So curiosity lights the spark and draws you in to start filling a gap, and flow sustains you through the grind while you're practically working something out. Anyhow, we all start with the basics of scientific intuition. We definitely have curiosity, and we're also pattern recognizers. So you can spot repeated things as well as breaks in a pattern. We work by trial and error, which is just experimentation where you act, observe, tweak, and try again. And along with all that, intuitive physics studies on babies and other animals, using the proxy of how long these little speechless creatures will stare at unexpected things like objects disappearing or defying gravity or whatever, these studies show we have some built-in expectations of consistency. So that's our starting point. And I can tell you, for reasons that I'm still working out, all of this was powerfully turned on for me as a child. And I got lucky because it didn't turn into defensive avoidance, just ever greater hunger for knowledge. So this one time in high school, we were supposed to do a 15-minute presentation on a topic of our choice, and I elected to summarize Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time. So I came in with graphs and cookware with plastic food wraps and balls, to demonstrate gravity, and basically took up a whole hour rather than my 15 minutes to talk about it, because I loved it and I thought others would too. And so at the end of the class, I had a few people come up to me and thank me. But it was all because they'd also been scheduled to present that day and got to skip it thanks to my blathering on and on and on. So, okay, maybe it's not turned on to the same extent, or at least on absolutely every subject for everyone. Still, we have this built-in drive and mechanism, but, well, it's just not perfect. Now, though it may have killed the cat, I simply have nothing bad to say about curiosity. I think it's all win-win. Pattern recognizing, however, that's not a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword with a handle made of more sword. It's almost all blade. Okay, it gets a whole lot of work done, but you gotta handle that thing with respect and a hint of dread. The pattern recognizer, at least in mine, but I suspect in all brains, is an always-on, overfitting machine that never stops whispering in your ear. That thing is tricky, and I, someone with a scientific background interested in how knowledge is acquired, minorly obsessed about biases and false beliefs and memories, well, I have felt the pull of superstition and magical thinking that are the hallmarks of misapplying the pattern recognizer. This seems especially strong in times of crisis, but starts getting louder whenever something is particularly important to you. We did a pretty good job for a long while relying on just this so-so built-in system, and at some point got the opportunity to just defer to Aristotle whenever the nature of the universe came up. Aristotle, the guy claiming that women have fewer teeth than men. I mean, how long would it have taken to get up off your ass and turn to your lady with, "Hey, could you open your mouth for a sec? There's something I'd like to check. It's just, don't worry about it." For a long time, mainly thanks to college, I thought philosophy was the set of those useless questions that, by definition, we can never resolve. Now, I don't think the question of the number of angels dancing on the head of a pin was ever actually discussed. And frankly, if you're going to have angels in your model of the universe, then angelology, like questions about angels' nature, location, and capabilities, actually are worth posing. Well, they are so long as there's some way of getting an answer. Anyways, at this point, I have a more fine-grained opinion of philosophy. Navel-gazing BS can be a fun exercise, but it's mostly a garbage waste of time. But questions of ethics, knowledge and its limits, theories of mind, politics, and what is actually real and what that means, well, I think they definitely have their place. So to me, there are three basic categories of question. Factual questions. There's a definite answer out there, independent of whether you can actually get to that answer or not. Normative questions. These things cover things that should be, and the answers are all based basically in values. I also lump in conceptual questions like definitions of meaning and categories, because these are basically just agreements we make between ourselves, more than anything objective. And finally, three, there's good old bullshit questions, things for which the only valid answer is moo. These are questions that collapse either because they are paradoxical, what was it like before time began, which is what Wittgenstein calls language on holiday, or they're just plain gibberish. So that last one goes straight to the bin after you've identified it. Now, the normative questions, like which economic system should we adopt, and that's normative without a doubt, like you can use facts to corroborate and prop up your opinion, but it's 100% about what you value most. Individual freedom, progress, however that's defined, fairness, however that's defined, stuff like that. Now, questions like that are important and set up how we're going to work together, so those are good ones to spend time on. However, only the factual questions can really benefit from the scientific method, and all those factual questions, including the number of teeth in a woman's head, have to be put through the ringer of this method if you want to build an edifice of useful knowledge that won't crash down at some point with potentially catastrophic consequences. So I'm sure lots of folks came to the same conclusions, but back in the 1600s, things really start rolling when Francis Bacon starts emphasizing observation to build up general principles and then testing those in the real world. I mean, this is a long-term collaborative effort. We have Galileo, actually dropping stuff and looking at what happens, Descartes pushing skepticism and logic, and on and on and on. So here's how what they built up goes for most interesting questions where this is applicable. You see something weird or wonder how it works, and then play with it in your mind for a little bit and come up with what you think is a probable explanation, mechanism, or answer. Now, you could stop there like Aristotle did with the teeth, but your mileage may vary. The hit rate just is not likely to be that great. To be scientific about it, you have to actually look at the world, but it's not even enough to compile a bunch of evidence from out there. It takes all the way to the 1930s to really get that it has to be possible to know if your proposed answer is actually wrong. So in comes Popper with the notion of falsifiability, saying that if a theory can't be falsified, then it can be twisted to explain anything, and it just isn't science. What it is storytelling. And this is the crux of it. You figure out how the world is different in the case that your idea is true as compared to the case where it's false, right? If there is such a difference, and it can actually be seen one way or another, then you arrange to pose that question to the universe. That's what an experiment is, just a repeatable question with a clear result. Then finally, you just mark the answer down and move on to the next thing. Boom, science. Now, there's lots of stuff we add on to the basic protocol. Publishing your methods, peer review, blah, blah, blah. But that's just building in resilience and double checking, in theory at least. So that's the basic method, and it points to what it's actually for. You see, the thing it doesn't do, something it doesn't cover at all, is where the hypotheses come from. Science isn't what generates hypotheses. The hypothesis, the theory about how things actually work, is an idea, and it comes from intuition, maybe informed by past experience, but the spark of it is from somewhere deep inside you, or from, well, everywhere if you're a panpsychist. But the point is, humans are idea-generating machines. We just can't stop, and it seems the more you do it, the faster it keeps happening, at least for me. Now, ideas can be good ideas, or total shite. And the thing is, the further we get along, the higher the proportion of garbage. This is like mutation. A random mutation might be advantageous. It might. But the more complex, fine-tuned, intricate a machine is, the more it becomes likely that a random change is going to break things rather than improve them. And if you're standing at the edge of tens of thousands of years of building up society, technology, whatever, it gets pretty likely that your brilliant new idea is going to be total crap. Either it's been tried and discarded a million times, which is why there's some push for publishing negative findings, though the incentive structure just aren't set up to actually encourage that, or it really is new and probably junk. Now, the process isn't completely random like mutation, but it's just that there are so few good ideas and true things in the infinite sea of bad ideas and false things that it really doesn't make a difference, I think. So that, my friends, is the purpose of the scientific method. It is a sieve, a colander, a filter to keep the garbage out of our knowledge soup. And that's it. That's the whole thing. You get to be human and play with ideas and generate an unending stream of possibility. And when you care to try and only want to include stuff that is valid and useful, well, you pull out our old pal, the scientific method, and you carefully and honestly distill delicious veracity from the mountains of refuse, or at least inch your way a tiny bit closer to truth. Just make careful note of the difference between science and the science. Did you hear the capital letters in there in the science? The science is something handed down by authority, blasted at you continuously. It's enforced with peer pressure, half-understood cargo cult incantations cloaked in the right language, and backed by a tsunami of nothing burger. It's propelled by feelings of righteousness and the dynamics of tribalism and group belonging. A good test is, if you ask too many questions or the wrong questions, you are, insert expletive of your choice here, dangerous and must be silenced. That's just how propaganda works. Science, on the other hand, isn't a thing or even a set of beliefs, but just a process of seeing which ideas get the right to stick around a little bit longer. Now, no group of people is uniform. Maybe you saw that thing with the flat earthers not long ago where some pastor or something brought a bunch of them to the Antarctic to actually do some observation. You could tell that some of them were actually interested in knowing, and those people publicly adjusted their views based on new evidence. Good job. Others, well, not so much. And they just shifted around to find a way to stubbornly hold on to their prior position. The flat earth notion is really quite stupid and so easily disproven, you don't actually have to go to the polls to do that. But once unleashed, paranoia is a tough beast to tame. And some people have been so mistreated and are so frightened, or they've acted and said things that would be painful to backtrack on, and eventually their identity just gets intertwined, that the certainty of hanging on to a wrong answer is better than anything else. So all this in a nutshell, let curiosity and ideas run rampant. Figure out if your current question is one that is of a factual nature. Decide if you care about getting closer to the truth more than you care about getting some particular answer. And if so, apply the most powerful technology we've ever devised to that question. Hypothesize hard, test harder. And that's it. Have fun and keep cruising, peeps. Till next time.